Well, good morning and welcome to this introduction to Samuel, 1 and 2 Samuel. We've been looking through the Bible. We did Ruth in a day yesterday, and now we move on to look at these two books together, 1 and 2 Samuel. But I want to take you back not quite as far as 1 or 2 Samuel to begin with. I want to take you back to the year 878 AD, about 40 miles away here in Bath, just outside of Taunton, to a place called Athelney. Now, Athelney in 878 was a significant place right in the middle of marshland, a little island. And this was the place where King Alfred the Great, was camped out at the time, because the Viking army had pretty much taken over the whole of all the other kingdoms of what went on to become England. And Wessex, this sort of area that we're in now, was the only kingdom really that was left. And Alfred had to camp out and hide in the Somerset marshes to plan his next strategy, what was going to come next. And the big dream for Alfred, the big goal that he was moving towards, was this idea of a nation unlike anything that our island had ever seen before, that would go on to be called England. And it was that dream of that nation that drove Alfred and his son Edward and Athelstan, his son, to become more than simply what they were, to the point where actually the first king of England was crowned just down the road in Bath Abbey, not all that long afterwards. Now I want to take you back to what we're looking at, 1 and 2 Samuel, because this idea of a nation, this dream of a nation, this aspiration of a nation, unlike any other nation on earth, is pregnant in the books of 1 and 2 Samuel. It's the idea that's running through the whole of the book, because you kind of move from, in Samuel, this idea of tribalism. We've seen the fall of tribalism into the concept of kingship. And with kingship, you've got the first Messiah. So Messiah in Hebrew simply means the anointed one. And the first anointed one that we see in the scriptures is Saul. Saul is anointed king. He is the chosen one, God's chosen one to be king, and Samuel anoints him as king. You've got the rising star of David in the book of 1 Samuel as well. As David comes onto the scene, you've got the story of David and Goliath. You've got this difficult and tumultuous relationship between David and Saul. You've got that in there as well. The establishment of a capital city in Jerusalem, the uniting of two kingdoms together. And you have this question, I guess, in 1 and 2 Samuel, because a lot happens, a lot's crammed in. Dynasties rise and fall, nations kind of rise and fall, kings rise and fall. You've got this incredible rise of David, meteoric rise of David, but you've equally got a very sharp decline with David and Solomon. We'll come on to a little bit later on. But the question is, why is it that we see in history, whether it be the Anglo-Saxon kings that were there in the 7th, 8th, 9th century, 10th century here in the UK, whether it's Roman empires, Egyptian empires, whether it's Assyrian empires, whether it's the modern empire, the British Empire, whatever it is, we see rise and we see decline and we see the falling away into obscurity. Why do we see those things? Is it political? Is it economic? Is it military reasons? Is it a kind of moral rot that seeps into society? That's a question that's there as well in the book of Samuel, the books of Samuel. And it's one that's relevant in our culture today. You know, it kind of feels like this great experiment of the kind of capitalistic way of running the world is kind of falling apart at the seams a little bit. And politically, don't have to look far in our own country and around the world to see, what's going to be happening in America later this year, what's just happened in Russia, what we see in the Holy Land at the moment. We see it in an economic sense, that people are struggling with poverty and with hardship, and not just in those really tough places of the world where you'd expect maybe there to be poverty, but you see it in our own country, where the gap between rich and poor is widening rather than moving closer together. You see it militarily, where you've got nation in war against nation, people group against people group. You see genocides happening around the world. You see, the people so quick to move to the sword rather than to explore the ways of peace. And absolutely, there is this sense of an abandonment of the morals that we have built our society on for centuries. And if that's the foundation of the building, if the foundation of the building is solid, then the house can stand. But when we remove the foundation, you can't remove it without destroying the building. And our nation as a house, so to speak, has been built upon the foundations and the truths of Scripture for centuries. And now we see a moving away from those truths in a way that destroys that foundation, and that the building that is built on top of it cannot stand in that way. So are we seeing some of the things that we see in 1 and 2 Samuel played out in our lives all around us? Samuel, just to finish with, is this great prophet, bridging the gap really from this sort of fortune teller type oracle that you saw in Judges, to be much more of the prophet that we come on later to see, prophets like Isaiah and Jeremiah and so on. So he's really the first of those, what we're more familiar with as the concept of a prophet. His name, Samuel, means God has heard. Shema Yuel means God has heard in Hebrew, and it's his mother Hannah who prays for a child that she doesn't feel she's able to have, and she says, Lord, if you give me this child, then I will dedicate my child to you. And when she falls pregnant and she gives birth to a child, she names that child God has heard my prayer, and dedicates him to work in the temple and to serve as an assistant to the priest Eli there. And there's that wonderful story at the beginning that you're going to hear, where Samuel's woken up in the night when God hears him. And if you know what I'm talking about, it's a wonderful story. If you don't, you're going to read about it soon. So I pray that as you go through this book, these 2 books together, then that you're blessed as you do that. But you might begin to see some of how this story of God's people Israel is beginning to take a turn and a move in a new direction. And I pray that as you put those pieces together, and as the Spirit puts those pieces together for you, that you might be blessed in the reading of it. Bless you.